We live in an era that treats the human mind like a hard drive with infinite capacity. If we just scroll long enough, read enough articles, and process enough data, we assume we will eventually figure out the universe. We are terrified of the unknown, so we try to cure that anxiety by swallowing entire galaxies of information. But an 11th century Persian philosopher named Nasser Khosrow looked at this exact human impulse and diagnosed it completely differently. In his philosophical text, The Banquet of the Brethren, Khosrow addressed a very specific debate about the nature of human reasoning. He poses a theory that sounds noble at first. Some argue that the human mind is restless and constantly in motion because it is actively trying to comprehend its creator. We think, we analyze, and we seek because we are trying to reach out and grasp the source of our existence. Khosrow rejects this entirely. He argues that if the intellect actually tried to comprehend the infinite, it would cease to be an intellect at all. A flawless mind proves its perfection not by calculating the entire cosmos, but by deliberately cutting off its own greed for infinite knowledge and recognizing exactly where its jurisdiction ends. To understand why, we have to look at Khosrow's strict architecture of logic. He divides existence into two categories: the muathir, or the cause, and the athar, the effect. The intellect is an effect. By the laws of logic, an effect can never encompass or reach back to comprehend its cause. It is blocked by a rigid boundary. Think of a character inside a retro video game trying to understand the programmer who built it. The character only exists in two dimensions. It can only think in pixels and code. The programmer exists in a physical reality completely outside the code. The avatar lacks the dimensional capacity to even imagine the keyboard typing it into existence. Khosrow points out that this limitation isn't a flaw in the intellect, it is a fixed feature of its geometry. A perfectly functioning mind understands the rules of cause and effect. Therefore, a perfect mind will never attempt to cross a boundary that would contradict its own internal logic. By willingly halting at this wall, the mind is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Stopping is not a failure of thought. Accepting our absolute limits is the final, crowning act of human reason. 2 centuries later, another Persian master, Jalal al-Din Rumi, took Khosrow's rigorous logical barrier and translated it into the spiritual poetry of the Mathnawi. Rumi agreed with the boundary, but focused on what it feels like to hit that wall. Rumi compares the intellect to a highly capable guide. If you need to find the king's palace, your intellect is the perfect tool. It will navigate the streets, avoid the pitfalls, and bring you safely to the courtyard. But the guide isn't allowed inside the throne room. At the door, he must wait. When we try forcing the mind past that door to decode the infinite, Rumi describes the sensation as a donkey stuck in deep mud. The harder the intellect struggles, the deeper it sinks into chaotic overthinking. Rumi offers a way forward. At the exact coordinate where analytical reason exhausts itself and stops, experiential love steps in. Love does not calculate, it simply experiences, and that is exactly how you cross the threshold. This realization is not confined to Eastern mysticism. Fast forward to 18th century Europe, and Immanuel Kant arrives at the exact same conclusion through cold Western rationalism in his Critique of Pure Reason. Kant maps reality into two distinct realms. On the left side of this diagram, we have the phenomena, the sensory, physical world of time and space where our minds operate perfectly. On the right, we have the noumena, the ultimate reality, or the thing in itself, which exists completely independent of human observation. Kant realized that when human reason tries to analyze the noumena, it glitches. It produces what he called antinomies, irresolvable paradoxes and contradictions that loop forever without an answer. Hey, if you are enjoying this deep dive into the philosophy of the mind, please make sure to hit subscribe. We explore the world's most complex ideas every single week, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. Kant's final verdict mirrors Khosrow perfectly. Pure reason must forcefully identify its own hard stop. It has to deny knowledge to make room for faith. Move further east to Taoism, and you find a tradition built around this concept. The foundational text, the Tao Te Ching, opens by stating that the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The moment you categorize ultimate reality, its true nature is destroyed instantly. The intellect relies on language, drawing boxes around concepts to make sense of them. Taoism suggests that these very words act as a thick wall, blocking us from actually experiencing the flow of existence. Zen Buddhism takes this a step further and turns it into a practice. They use the koan, a paradoxical riddle, like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? It's not a math problem, it is a psychological weapon designed to short-circuit your analytical mind. A Zen student will wrestle with a koan for months or even years. The intellect attacks the riddle from every angle, trying desperately to find a logical loophole, until it finally exhausts its energy reserves and collapses in total defeat. In that exact moment of surrender, a state of sudden clarity, or satori, rushes in. Across centuries and continents, the diagnosis remains the same. Attempting to conquer the infinite with a finite mind is an impossible, exhausting task. Today, society descends into anxiety because we have ignored this ancient boundary. We carry devices that give us the illusion of omniscience, and we panic when we inevitably fail to process the endless barrage of global data, tragedies, and opinions. We possess immense technological processing power, yet we feel a growing disconnection from any real sense of personal meaning. The more data we consume, the less we truly understand. This is where Khosrow provides genuine psychological relief. He reminds us that the intellect is a practical, earthly tool designed for daily navigation. It is built for the finite. It lacks the necessary dimensions to provide ultimate existential answers. Accepting our inability to compute the entirety of the universe is not intellectual weakness. It is the only sustainable way to survive modern information overload. We can apply this by practicing strict intellectual humility, admitting when a question is simply above our dimensional pay grade. From there, we can actively cultivate other ways of knowing, leaning into intuition, focusing on presence, and quiet observation. When you stop treating your existence like a mathematical problem to be solved, the cognitive fatigue of the search begins to lift. By letting go of the demand for total comprehension, you clear away the friction of constant overthinking, making room for a quiet sense of relief. Allow your mind to do its job. Let it take you to the very edge of its capability. When you reach that cliff, thank it for guiding you this far, and let mystery handle the rest.